Thank you for taking the time out of your day. I know you're a busy man,
Yep.
but thank you for joining us here on the podcast. You and I had the chance to kind of meet, and I think you met with some other folks from Austin Lane at the AI and Data Transformation Conference in Austin. I, I of course have my own opinions about all the things that went on there. I'd like to hear kind of your thoughts and kind of breakdown of kind of what that covered for you, and did it reaffirm anything, or did it, give you some new insights?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of AI in general, I think it's quite the polarizing topic when it comes to how it's going to impact the construction industry. Um, there are some industries, not ours, unfortunately, where you can see directly how this is going to make a quite a substantial change in the next, 5+ years, right? Like if we're talking about maybe the development coding industry, right? Just software
Mhm.
development in general. Right now, you have things like ChatGPT and DeepSeek and other large language models that can be amazing AI assistants and really put like years worth of coding knowledge into a young developer's hands in the snap of a finger just by asking questions. I don't see the same one-to-one kind of replication for how that's going to work in construction. But I think as I now consider how AI is going to help transform this industry in the coming years. For me, it's along the same trajectory, which is knowledge transfer, right? Like these things like ChatGPT, DeepSeek, just these chatbots in general, backed by the large language models, have provided an opportunity for us to ask questions and learn about things in a way that is much simpler than ever before. So if I'm a young project engineer and I want to learn about lien waivers, something that's, probably not generally in the project engineer one playbook, you just go ask a question about it and you're going to get a pretty good answer. And I think as we consider how AI is going to help transform the industry in the coming years, that's one of the things, that knowledge transfer piece, particularly as we have a lot of an aging kind of generation that's going to be exiting the industry to retirement. I think that's going to help a lot. But I think it's also important for us to figure out how not only to rely on that AI, but to extract that information out of that workforce before they leave our organizations as well. And then to kind of get back to what a lot of the topics were in the conference was get that data somehow categorized or indexed within our own data warehouses or data lakes in our organizations so that we're not just relying on what ChatGPT thinks a lien waiver is, but we can actually go in and pull data from what our people who have the real world years and years worth of experience to get that answer in the future. And I think that's what a lot of AI products are kind of focused on right now as well, like training some of these models now specifically on construction information, which is going to be really, really interesting to see how that turns out in the hopefully not too distant future.
Yeah. Well, and so that's a very interesting take on it. I find a lot of similarities in my own thoughts. One, about training people. Obviously, it has immense ability to provide you mass amounts of information within, a blink of an eye, right? You don't have to know anything about lien waivers, right, until you need to know about it, and then you should be able to pull it up utilizing that content. Um, but then there's that opposite side of the coin, which some discussed in some of the things where it's like, well, what about critical thinking and maybe leaning on the product too much,
Yeah.
where you suddenly become a liability, right? Whether it hallucinates an answer or it doesn't necessarily understand what your prompt was, and you just take it at face value and run with it. So what are your thoughts on that? I know that's kind of where we are at the
Yeah.
industry.
Yeah, I think for me, it's a cultural thing as far as that goes, right? I think that as the folks within our respective organizations who are thinking about this kind of thing, and frameworking how we're going to advance our businesses with it, we also have to be very mindful of the risks, and that's certainly one of them. So for me, it's about culture and preaching to our people that yes, these are great tools, but trust and verify, trust but verify rather, the information that you're receiving. So if you need a quick kind of, well, what is this? And I do this all the time, even for stuff that I'm still learning about, in my day to day. I'll get some quick info so I can speak at least intelligently about it and then I'm going to go take that quick brief that I got and say, okay, perfect. Now I know who I should go talk to. And now I also know what questions to ask the person I need to go talk to about. So it's a really good first step. And for us to make sure that we take it to that second and that third level, which is still relying on the years and years of industry experience that we have within our organizations. It's just about a cultural thing and teaching our people the best way to utilize the tools that are at their disposal. So I think that goes back to making sure that, us as industry professionals within construction technology have AI policies in our companies. We're preaching the best way to use these tools, what data to put in, what data not to put in from a data security perspective, for example. What are really good ways to prompt these tools to get the responses you want? And then once you get some of these responses, if you still have more questions, where are your other resources to go to find out that next step, that next piece of information? And if we can communicate that well to the people that we're putting these tools in front of, I think ultimately that hybrid approach is going to really create some efficiencies and some quick learning, where otherwise, again, like it may have not even been something that crossed a younger person's mind to look up, but now they have that ability.
So are you putting some of these ideas and these things into place at Harkins?
Yes, absolutely. We're encouraging our folks to look at what's out there and to utilize the tools at their disposal. But that being said, part of the AI policy that we have to put in place is these are the pieces of data that you absolutely can't put in, particularly the free tools, because the free tools don't have the same type of data security stipulations that we're going to get if we're paying for a certain tool, right? So that's where we have to draw the line. Like, look, we have CoPilot that comes along with our Microsoft licenses. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we can put a little bit more data in there. Still want to avoid things like PII. Obviously, can't put like very specific data about projects and anything like that may not be appropriate for the model to have. But at least if it's contained within our environment, then we know we're good. But when it comes to the free tools, we absolutely cannot put, certain pieces of information in there. So all of this is encapsulated within an AI policy that we put together to make sure that we are setting ourselves up from a data security perspective and making sure that our people are using the tools in the appropriate way based off of what's out there right now. So you got to walk a thin line, and you got to be able to encourage innovation while also remaining secure from a data security and a cybersecurity perspective. And I think there's no one answer to that right now. It varies by business, the type of work you're doing, the type of projects that you're on. And it's really important, again, as now ChatGPT and others become commonplace in our everyday lives for all people, that we are making sure that our folks are using it in the appropriate ways when it comes to business use.
Yeah. I always wonder about that, being able to, security, data security is so important. And I wonder how you control that. And did you realize maybe at some point that some of your data was kind of getting out there to places it shouldn't be? Or is it just one of those things you decided, hey, AI is coming along. Somebody had to raise the red flag and said, we really, really need to address this with our teams like today.
Well, I think it's more of like we all started realizing that we use ChatGPT, right? Like this isn't just something that's a novelty item anymore. There are many very good benefits in terms of using it for writing exercises, for ideation, for assisting with quick like learning things like we were talking about with the lien waivers piece. So we have to, as we realize that this is here to stay, number one, and then B, there are very many good outcomes from allowing folks to use these new tools that are coming on the market. And I'm not just speaking about ChatGPT, right? Like there are so many AI tools out there, whether that's some of these companies focused on predictive analytics and what that can do, some of these companies with the computer vision and what they're doing. But in general, there's so much good that's going to come out of this. We realize like we have to also make sure we're doing it correctly from a business practice perspective. And that's really what encouraged us to put together a policy that we felt like was fair, kept us secure, but also allowed our people to innovate with these new tools.
Right. Well, one of the things we talked about, and this is something I get confused about sometimes. AO Mobile deals with what I call foundational data. Fairly simple, right? How many hours did you work? How many units did you produce? What were your expenses for that week? What's your daily diary notes? These are kind of, baseline foundational kind of things. And I think people get really overwhelmed when they start to say, we need to organize our data. It's a very, very broad term, right? Your data could be your RFIs. Your data could be your payables, could be your receivables. It's a lot to tackle.
Yeah.
In your thoughts, I guess, and what are you guys tackling first? What is there a first? Are we trying to do a parallel? What are you guys looking at?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we talk about organizing our data and what that means, like for me, there's kind of two levels to what we can do. Particularly, let's just stay on like the ChatGPT chatbot kind of like LLM example or use case of AI right now. There's what it's trained on currently. So if I ask it a question about lien waivers, it's going to scour the internet. It's already got base like training data that it's learned what that is. It's going to provide you a pretty canned response. And that response is going to be fairly good, right? It's not going to have the nuances for your specific piece of the business that you're in or for your specific company's processes, but it is going to have generally a high level summary of what that is and give you a good starting place, as I was talking about earlier. The second piece, and really where I can see, over the course of the next 3 to 5 years, a lot of efficiencies coming, is if you are then able to take this type of chatbot or large language model and sit it on top of your specific organization's processes, data. So you can get insights about historical analysis on projects. You can get information about your SOPs. If you have a handbook, you can ask it very specific questions about that. CoPilot, it kind of is already starting to get there when it comes to documents specifically, but you have other tools. I think obviously, Trunk Tools is one of them. There's something I just saw the other day called Link AI. There's tools now that are going to be focused on more specifically your data. So what that means is you as an organization have to take that first step in getting your data to a place, whether that's your document structure within SharePoint, whether that's a data warehouse that then is going to ultimately inform analysis that some of these LLMs are using to respond and to give answers. You have to make sure your ducks are in a row within your organization to truly see the greatest benefits from this in the future. So for us, where do we start? What do we prioritize? Well, we luckily have a bit of a head start because we've been putting our data into structured databases for a number of years now, primarily first and foremost to automate reporting, to build integrations between different software systems, and to bring all of our data into one place just in general for the benefits that brings. Now, obviously, that's going to turn into, okay, now we have it here, and this is going to help inform our AI and what we can do with machine learning and predictive analytics, because we have our data. Now we just need to transform it the right way, to engineer it, to then train models and get our outcomes. In terms of what we prioritized first, meaning types of data, low-hanging fruit, right? Like all of our software that has an open API, because I can very easily just write a simple couple lines of code that are going to call that API, get the data, put it into our data warehouse. Easy. Then after we get through all the low-hanging fruit, we start to move into some of the other softwares, maybe more legacy software, stuff that's on-prem. That becomes a little bit more difficult, and there's a lot more time and coding involved. And so that's really the approach we've taken. Like if it's easy to grab data, it's low-hanging, boom, we're going to put it in our data warehouse, no problem. And then we have to start to think a little bit more outside of the box, for the other things. Is it even worth it? Are we going to upgrade that system to a cloud-based system in the future? So should we not worry about it right now? That kind of thing. And that's how we've taken the prioritization approach.
Yeah, I think the whole juice worth the squeeze is a very important topic to talk about, especially with construction companies that may have been working on legacy systems for years, and they're sitting there thinking about making a transition, but they're looking at this giant behemoth of data that's very, very difficult to either parse through or get to or get anything out of, and it becomes this thing. So is it worth it? Or I literally had this conversation with the group just the other night, where is it worth it to do that? Or is it worth it to say, okay, stop here. We're going to move forward. We're going to be collecting data, as you said, in a structured system. And this is the structured system. And we're going to move on from there. And because this over here is kind of like triage, it's almost too much of an effort to even worry about when I'm thinking about moving forward. What is it? What am I thinking? The limits of the, like almost like a time limit on your data over here. Is it really worth it? Does it have that much value for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's likely something that most people are doing in our industry every day is devoting resources of some kind to this effort or this endeavor worth the value ultimately that I'm going to get out of that endeavor, right?
Right.
Any business in any industry, that's a common problem, the resource issue, and particularly when it comes to construction technology, the resource issue becomes even more of a common problem because we aren't in the technology industry. So generally speaking, we don't have a lot of advanced technologists on staff in our companies. So we have people like myself who have kind of taken it upon themselves to delve into this world and to figure it out because it's going to make our companies better. But in many cases, companies don't have anyone who's thinking about this. So then it's like, do we spend the money on consultants? Do we hire these people? Is the money that I'm going to spend on this stuff worth the outcome at the end of the day? And the same thing can be said about what data we try to put into our structured databases, into our data lakes and data warehouses, and the connections and the integrations that we're going to build between all of our systems. The same thing can be said about the AI tools that we either maybe are considering purchasing for X amount of dollars per project or corporately. So it's just something that there's really no straight answer to. It's more of an art than a science, and you just got to take what is the perceived value of what I'm going to get, how much money am I going to spend or time and effort to get that outcome, and at the end of the day, how do I feel about that once I've done that analysis? So yeah, it's tough, and that outcome, that value is going to differ from company to company to company, and that's really the struggle that I think a lot of these AI providers are going to face in our industry, is trying to. There's no one size fits all for value when it comes to all of these different companies in our construction world. So the ones that'll be the most successful are the ones that can really figure out the best way to market their value and to land with the people they're trying to sell it to.
Yeah, that is you hit it on the head there. There's one thing about this that I think a lot of people confuse about just even software in general, is that the technology or the software itself should be, one, super easy, and two, it's going to solve all your problems. Yeah. If there's anything that, software, if it does, one of those things where it solves a problem of yours, great. But and I don't know if it balances out that it's going to be super easy to do that. No, it's not going to be super easy to do that, but it is going to solve your problem. Right. It's kind of like, it's almost like good, fast, and cheap, pick two kind of things. Exactly. You can pick your options, but it's kind of like you're going to pay some more money for something that does more for you. Yeah. But I think there's a big misconception about AI, and I even hate to call it AI. I mean, it's such a terrible buzzword. It gets so overused already. But any kind of large language model, any type of machine that you have to train to do a specific, task is going to have some complexity to it. And it is going to be a challenge. And one of the things that I think I see, even in just going to these conferences and reading the articles, even the online virtual conferences, got a lot of folks out there going, okay, so it doesn't really solve all my problems. Why do I need it? Yeah. But then you have the proponents of it. Hamza at that, great. But he's like, hey, if you're not jumping on the bandwagon, you're probably you're going to fall behind. And
Yeah.
I think that's a struggle for some folks. They're like, really? Is that really true?
Yeah, that's it's interesting because I was just about to touch on that a little bit. Right now we're in the early stages of all of this, and I think that we have such a tendency in our industry to like need something to be absolutely perfect before we spend money on it, right? And I think that we need to kind of all take a step back and understand how new this is going to be, and it's really an opportunity for us to be a part of defining how this becomes industry norm in the coming years. But of course, the product providers aren't going to give it away for free. So I think that it's in the best interest of companies who are willing to do this, to put a little bit of money towards exploring what's out there, understanding that it's not going to be perfect, rolling with the punches, and helping the companies that are building this stuff to get better through the feedback that you're going to provide, and through the guidance that you're going to give them. Yes, I got a lot of value out of this particular thing you built. No, I got no value out of this. Move away from it, right? Like, tell them that. I always tell everyone, like, tell us when we do something within my own organization. I'm like, I don't want to hear about what you love about it. I want you to tell me why it sucks, because that's a direction I need to know that I'm going to move away from. So, it's just very important, I think, for people to understand that nothing is going to be perfect at this stage right now when everything is so new. And we have to be willing to spend a little money for ultimately what the outcome is going to be 5+ years down the road. And hopefully we will be a lot closer to perfect then, but it's still never going to be perfect, right?
Yeah. Well, I also think we deal with the idea that we're in an industry that deals in absolutes.
Yeah.
Right. And people that deal in absolutes. Like, if you hand somebody a drill that doesn't drill a hole, right, it's broken and it's never going to work. Right. Or if you hand somebody a hammer that if it breaks on the first time they try to, okay, that's never going to work. Right. They deal in absolutes. And part of it is that whole, kind of, this is a dangerous business concept. Is like, if this thing doesn't work for me, doesn't save my time, if it's wasting my time on some sort of experiment, then what is the point? And I think that's another big deal when it comes to the culture of people that we're talking about, because there's several levels, right? And especially when we get into that foreman superintendent level, trying to use these tools and realizing, even with software, right? If software has a glitch, well, this thing's a piece of crap, and they want to throw their iPad or whatever they have across the job site.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing, the way that I like to present it is, we're in a business of taking risks, right? Construction is all about minimizing and mitigating risks. At the end of the day, the risks we're used to are budget risks, schedule risks, safety risk, of course, first and foremost, quality risk. Okay. But now, technology risk can be a new one. And I think that we have to be okay with, sometimes we make a bet on a product or a type of technology that ultimately didn't end up panning out. And it's okay. That's not the end of the world. But because you took that risk, you've learned something from it. You're better because of it now. And then when you take the bets on some of the ones that end up being huge wins, you're way better for it now, right? The same way that you're going to have wins and losses with your project related risks that you're taking every single day as you decide to build the jobs that you ultimately, take on. So it's just a different way of thinking. And I think it's so new that it's going to take a little while to really get the whole industry there. But it's just, again, about taking risks, spending a little money here to learn more about this tech, to bring it to our organization. Sometimes it's going to be a huge win and really enhance everything we do and provide a ton of value. Sometimes it's not going to land at all, and we're going to have to move away from it. And we, in theory, lost that money. But that's okay, because it's not going to be the first time that a little bit of money's lost. It certainly won't be the last. So we have to be okay with understanding there's a technology related risk in terms of the resources we're going to outlay to learn more about what we've got coming and to pave the way for the future. And as soon as we can kind of get on that train, I think that organizations that we're a part of are going to begin to advance even more and more. And then as more of those organizations kind of all rise up together, we're going to see tremendous gains in the years to come. And it's really exciting.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's an interesting thing that you bring up about a technology risk.
Yeah.
I think people don't see it as that a lot of times. It's either, like I said, it's either a yes or a no. Like, we do this, we're going to find benefit out of it. They're not expecting to take some sort of risk on it to go, well, we have to work into it a little bit to get to a better outcome, right? It's not automatically going to produce exactly what you thought. It's almost like hiring a new project engineer, right? Or, somebody just fresh out of college, or some new tradesperson fresh out of the trades or apprentice. Is like, you got to put a little work into that person, that entity. That training is super, super valuable, because that's what turns it into that excellent project manager that you're hoping for, or that that next generation of tradesperson that is a master of their craft. Those types of
100%.
things.
Yeah. You get out of it ultimately what you put in, right? It's the same way when you really train individuals from the moment they come to your organizations out of college, and put that time and effort into giving them opportunity and building them up and training them. If you put similar resources into learning about new tech and giving it a try, and really trying to figure out how it best fits into your processes and how you do things within your business, you're going to eventually get much better outcomes than if you're just like, oh, grab it and I don't like it, doesn't work. But what if the first time that project engineer made a mistake, he said, oh, no, you know what? You're no good. You're not going to be in our business anymore. Grave mistake, right? You have to roll with the punches. You have to understand that it's a learning experience, and develop that person. The same thing can be said about the new technology. We have to develop our business around how we're going to utilize it. And there's always going to be a learning curve. And as long as we can figure out how to embrace that rather than to push it away, that's how we ultimately can be successful at the end of the day.
I agree. I think the training possibilities initially on this are going to be super valuable for most of the up and comers, just because of the speed of delivery.
Yeah.
Kind of knowledge at your fingertips, readily available in those tools, is a huge factor.
The knowledge transfer piece is going to be, hopefully amazing. And if you can couple it with, kind of the tip of the iceberg, you get a little taste from what the technology can give you. And then you have the folks who are, able to go and take that little piece, like I was saying earlier, and then really ask more detailed questions to the industry professionals that you have. That's going to be the ticket right there.
Yeah, I totally agree. So just a little bit about you. I know I didn't ask you this at the very, very beginning, but how did you get into this kind of crazy side of the construction world where it's all about the data?
Yeah, sure. I mean, first and foremost, I'm lucky enough to have a company that is willing to kind of pursue this type of stuff and give me the opportunity to kind of go after this stuff, right? So I think that aligning yourself with businesses that also have similar goals and mindsets is so important if this is something that other people are interested in. But for me, it was a lot of luck. I mean, my background's in project controls. I worked for many years as a project controls consultant, working with general contractors and owners alike, from a scheduling perspective, cost perspective, just doing typical project controls work. And of course, project controls kind of finds its way into analytics in many cases. So as I came back to industry to work for Harkins, we really started to kind of focus on, we have all this data in the cloud now because we're using cloud-based project management platforms. How do we get that data and do more reporting on it? How do we build automations with it, integrate it with other data? It always just kind of interested me. So, as I started kind of working on that kind of thing more and more, and was lucky enough to have a company that was embracing what we were doing with it, it just ultimately kind of transforms. And then, 5 years ago, I didn't see the age of AI kind of booming the way it did the past 2 years, but introduced ChatGPT in 2023, and here we are. So it was kind of a little bit of luck, a little bit of making sure that I was working with folks who were like-minded and culturally responsive to what we were doing from a tech perspective, which I think is so important. And then just driving home and being a good communicator. I think that's one of the most important things, is helping people see it from a different point of view, but also understanding their point of view too, and being able to relate to the folks who are going to be using it at the end of the day, and being able to present it in a way that it's meaningful to them is so important. So that's kind of a little bit about my story, but everyone's is somewhat different, and that's the beauty of where we're all at in this crazy world of construction tech together.
Yeah. Well, I sometimes wonder, in my 30 years of being in construction and now being on the tech side, it's an interesting transition to watch how technology uh, is almost having to conform a little bit more to the rules of construction rather than construction conforming to the rules of technology.
Yeah.
Because construction is so complex and because of its, I don't know, with attitude or cultures or it's just its straightforwardness to like, hey, we got a lot of problems, and yours doesn't solve about 50% of those.
Yep. Yep.
So I think it's funny just in looking at it because, like I said, I come from the construction world. And so then entering into the tech world was different for me because now I realize when it comes to, building software or implementing software and doing those kind of things, this is not a press of the button, type of operation, right?
Yeah.
You want it to be pressed to the button, you want it to be, but there is a lot to work through, especially with a construction company to figure out integration points. And, if we integrate it with this, does it break something somewhere else? And then does all this data really work together? Or do we need to, figure out a better data strategy to make that work? I mean, there's a lot of things in the way.
Yeah. I mean, you're ultimately, you said it best, right? Like construction has not necessarily conformed to the technology. The technology has conformed to construction and the certain places within our industry that have been more, I would just say, adaptable than others, right? But I think that we're lucky enough, even though we're one of the later adopters of new tech, no matter what it is, whether it was cloud-based software in 2000s or AI now in the 2020s. But we're lucky to kind of be in a place where I think we have a lot more of a unique problem to solve with technology than some other industries, and it keeps it fun. That's for sure. Every day is a new challenge, and we're it's fun to be working on the different things we're working on, albeit to some folks in the tech space, it may seem like the Stone Age still.
I totally get it. Yeah, but without our industry, nothing exists. The lights don't stay on, the water doesn't run, and the roads would be jam packed with nothing but cars that are stalled. So anyway, well, listen, man, I appreciate your time today. It's great talking with you.
Thank you, Robert.
Yeah, and as always, I like to talk to folks, again and again if I can. I'll reach out to you maybe later on, late spring or early summer, and we'll talk again, see how things are going for you at Harkins, and if there's any new things that come up, I'd love to hear about them.
Will do. It's been great catching up, Robert. Thanks again for having me, and nice talking to you. We'll catch up soon.